The Dallas Mavericks made it all the way to the NBA Finals. Let's talk about their fantasy value. Let's talk about whether I think they're going to get back there, how that impacts their fantasy production or expectations for the upcoming season. And let's hear what Michael Bolton thinks.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and as NBA training camps begin, I'm here for Muscle Watch. I've put on 20 pounds of fat. I'm also the lead, not fantasy, whatever that is, maybe I'll do that as well. I'm the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms, so give it a thumb and a double bang and a comment. And leave all that down below where it belongs. The Dallas Mavericks. Let's just get straight into talking about these Mavs because, I don't know, I want to. The Mavericks obviously made it back to the NBA, or made it to the NBA Finals last season. I think a lot of people just absolutely pencil them in to be a top 4 seed in the West. Maybe they are, but also maybe they're not. There are a lot of good teams there still. Obviously, shake up with the Wolves. But that does not mean that they are guaranteed to get back to that position. But what I think is more important in terms of looking at the Mavs for this season is they've made it to the NBA Finals, and fatigue can be a problem. Getting back to the NBA Finals is tough, but early season fatigue, more management plans in terms of watching for injuries, it is something to at least have in the back of your mind. Not saying it's something to base your entire livelihood around and deciding in fantasy. That is something that has some level of impact across some areas of the game that can't be ignored. We also can't ignore, and we're going to talk about it later, that this team has a 2-game week in March during the majority of people's fantasy playoffs, which is an absolute buzzkill. We'll talk about, for the second year in a row, to make it a double buzzkill. Let's take a look at their projected starting 5, and only one position really up for grabs here, I think, and that's the center spot. It's going to be Doncic. It's going to be Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, and I do believe that Dereck Lively II will get that nod. Now, when Daniel Gafford came over in the trade at the trade deadline, Jason Kidd and Luka Doncic were saying it's so good for us to get a backup center, man. That's fantastic. And then Lively got hurt, and Gafford took the starting job and started most of the way through. In the playoffs, Lively clearly outplayed Gafford, I thought. Year 2 for Lively, clearly a better part of the future. We're going to put Dereck Lively under the lens later on as well, but I do believe that he will start. Now, starting does not mean 30 minutes. It does not mean 33 minutes. It might be 24. It might be 23 to him and Gafford 25. I don't think so, but it could be. So I think that that's probably the only one that's up for debate, but I do think that they will go with Lively there. I don't know if the gap in the minutes between the two will be enough to offset the fantasy permanent value between the two. Gafford's a better permanent producer than Lively, and it would probably need to be 28-20 to mean that Lively has a significant advantage there. But I don't think we're going to get that. But if I had to lean one way, I would say that, and I do because I'm putting up the thing, that Lively will be the starter for the Mavs. Where those minutes roll, well, that's just going to be something that's intriguing to watch as we go through. In terms of other risks there is a risk, I think, that someone like Klay Thompson might not be in the closing lineup for this team. We might see someone like a Najee Marshall in there, or you could even throw in an extra guard of a Spencer Dinwiddie into that position, or maybe out of left field a Quentin Grimes, because there's a chance that Klay's cooked. He had a pretty strong second half of the season, but again, terrible in the playoffs. And we know the history, we know the age. He may not be a closer on this team every single night. So again, that is something we pay attention to when we are doing our fantasy drafts, and we are paying attention to all the different things that go into it. Let's take a look at where value may lie on this squad from a fantasy perspective. Who are the undervalued players? I actually have 4 names, and it's all going to depend on individual circumstances and the type of leagues that you're playing in and where you're playing those leagues as to who has the value and when they have that value. But I will start with Gafford, who I do think will come off the bench. But like I said, if he's playing 20 minutes a night, then I'm not as interested. 22, 23, well, his Yahoo rank of 142 just seems too low. That's the last round, second last round type of area. Gafford is 26. He was awesome last season. Now, in large part, and part of the reason I was really into drafting Dan Gafford last season was because he was playing on the Washington Wizards and they did not have another center. So he would have to play minutes and he would have to do a lot of good stuff, and he did. And he was like a -1 player for fantasy as a top 60 guy. That's what he was last season. So, yeah, I do think that Dan Gafford drops off, but not that far. That's 80 spots. 11 and 8 was his numbers last season. 73 from the field. He's not great on free throws, and that 73 could easily be 67. It could actually be 75, to be honest. He played 25 minutes a night. So if he plays those 22, 23, that's what I mean. Like, that drop from that level down to 140-ish on Yahoo it's just too far. I think we've sort of pulled the rug too far in that direction, and that is a complete mixing of metaphors. But that makes no sense. And I'm not loving Gafford the same way I did last season, because I think he's fine as a player without being excellent. He's totally okay as a player, and we said that all the time last season, but he had that perfect runway. And now the runway's a little bit more crowded, but still, at 142, it does not seem right to me. And as much as I'm not big on Klay Thompson this season, he sits one ranking spot behind Gafford on Yahoo at 143. And while Klay, there are plenty of reasons for us to be concerned about where he is and the shooting display in those playoff games, and there's a reason that I made the old washed watch graphic, and it was for him because he looked terrible, and he lost his starting spot during the season to Brandon Podziemski, and he sucked and cried and whinged all season about, what about me? I'm so good, and I need to do this, and I'm actually not criticizing him for that, because it is hard to accept your own sort of mortality and not having that ability to do the things you've done in the past, and obviously a very prideful man, and this is part of why I think he's playing for Dallas now, is that Klay really struggled with understanding the limitations in where he is at the moment. But last season, he's 35 now. He had 24 usage in 30 minutes only. 18 points, 3.5 threes. 3.5 threes is really good. 18 points, remember, absolute bang-on fantasy average. He doesn't rebound, he doesn't get assists, he doesn't get steals, he doesn't get blocks. He shot 43, which is below average, and 93 from the line is great, but it is on low volume. It was on low volume, we saw that. Klay, last season was about 109th in -1 rankings, which, again, is not awesome. When I say about 109th, I mean literally bang on 109th. It's not awesome, but 143, again, is a pretty significant drop. And I think at around 120, an 18-point scorer, and even if he's not that, and I don't think he will be, because he was the second offensive option in Golden State, and he won't be in Dallas. He just won't be, because Kyrie and Luka are there. But I think that 140 mark is just... it's pushing it a little bit too far in the other direction. I've got Dereck Lively on this list as well as an undervalued player, and we are going to push him through when we talk under the lens later on, but his ESPN rank is 139 for categories, and for points leagues, the ADP of 132 and the rank of 135, they just seem too low. I'm happily taking Dereck Lively inside the top 120. If you wanted to take him around 110, I get it. 100 may be going a little bit too far, but when we're at that stage in the draft, finding centers, they sort of just really disappear, especially for category formats, and having the value in him or the idea of him being the starter makes you want to push a little higher. And I'll also throw this one out. Now, I'm not saying that PJ Washington's great. That'd be silly to say that. But he's ranked 193 on Yahoo, which suggests that in 16-team leagues, you don't draft him. And I would suggest that is wrong. I would draft him in 12-team leagues under the right circumstances. Now, PJ is one of the Gattuso legends. If you don't know what a Gennaro Gattuso legend is, well, I apologize that you've only recently joined the show. But as we know, when PJ plays, he sometimes may be good, and he sometimes may be shit. And we got that experience. We saw him shoot 1,000,000% from 3 against the Thunder in the playoffs, and then 27 from the other games? This is what he does. But he's locked in. He's going to start. He played 30 minutes a night last season. He averaged 13 and 5.5. He had a steal and 0.8 blocks, and he shot 44. Yeah, that's yuck. And 68 from the line. Also yuck. But he scores, he gets some rebounds, he hits some threes, he blocks some shots. Just solid enough towards the back end. And definitely not someone that when you sit at 100, he's 139th last season, 193 in a ranking spot. It doesn't really add up to me. So that's just one to just keep an eye on because it's too low. Simple as that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans, as the script will tell me to say, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because you can be sitting there forming that nice ass groove in your couch, watching the games, and you go, ooh, light bulb. That's what would happen if it was a TV show. You go, I've got an idea. I can see something developing. I got a hunch. So you open up your app. You got all the bets there, the live bets happening on FanDuel. And now you can see the live stats right on that same page. You can see the play-by-play for that game tracking down and go back and go, yeah, I was actually right. Patrick Mahomes is only throwing short air yard passes, even though he hit his career high today. Anyway, maybe you thought that Patrick Mahomes was due to air one out and you could see something in the play calling of cheeseburger legend Andy Reid. Maybe you did that too. Whatever it is, you can check it all out in the one spot on the app. And if you're a new customer to FanDuel, well, I've got something even better for you. It's even greater. That doesn't sound right, but we're here. $5. Place a bet. That's it. $5 bet. New customer. And you get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. So head across to FanDuel. Check that $5 first bet and get your $200 in bonus bets. And of course, don't forget to gamble responsibly. So you might say, Josh, after we've done undervalued players, what could possibly be coming next? Well, I've got a surprise for you. It's overvalued players, but you didn't see that coming. We're going to take a look at the guys who I think currently are sitting at a spot that is just a little bit too high. And I'm going to start with Kyrie Irving, who is undoubtedly a very good player. I was debating what I was going to do in terms of discussing Kyrie and his fantasy value and how do I incorporate the 2-game playoff week. I will just say this. In terms of looking at just per game numbers, I'm not going to really talk, because I could say that with Luka as well and say that you taking him at 3 is not a great idea. But there are ways around that. You can look at how your schedule looks, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the schedule analysis part of this show. So it's the same with Kyrie. But one thing I will tell you, you do not, under any circumstance, take Kyrie and Luka together. You can in Roto, go for your life. In head-to-head leagues, you cannot draft them together. I will be very clear on that with Kyrie and Luka. I wanted to highlight, though, that the Yahoo X rank for Kyrie Irving has him 14th. And even without a 2-game playoff week, that would be insanely high. He's fine in that area for categories. He brings you nice numbers with his efficiency. But in a points league, that is just too high for Kyrie. You do not want to take him at that area, without even considering the playoffs, which you absolutely need to. Kyrie played 35 minutes with 28 usage. He fit in awesomely with Luka. He averaged 25.5 points, 3 threes, 5 assists, 1.3 steals, 50 and 91 as his percentages. And as you can see, when you get someone on that volume shooting those percentages, that makes them awesome, unbelievably good for category leagues. It doesn't really translate for points leagues at all, so it doesn't matter. So that valuation of that X rank of Kyrie looks fine on a per-game category league position, but for points leagues, it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, it doesn't give us anything. So that is why I think he is an overvalued player at that spot. We talked about Daniel Gafford before, and I said that Gafford is in a weird sort of undervalued spot on Yahoo, but for ESPN, I think it's the other way around. I don't understand his positioning at all over there. Why are we looking at Gafford with a category rank of 62, which is basically bang on what he did last season, understanding that 67% of last season he played for Washington, and his points league ranks at 68. I don't even think he was near that number at all last season. And now we've got to consider that maybe he plays 20 minutes a night behind Dereck Lively, or 23, not 25 or 26. That is just a recipe for a bad choice. And the same thing for Klay Thompson, who on Yahoo, I thought was way down the board. And on ESPN, they've gone the other way around. Clay's got an ADP of 85. He's got a category league rank of 64, which is bonkers. Insane. I did the Warriors show the other day, and I said that maybe this Buddy Hield ranking might be the worst I've ever seen, at least for this season. Klay Thompson at 64. What is happening? Not in a million years would I go anywhere near him at that spot. In points leagues, Clay's ADP on Yahoo 109 doesn't make sense to me to take him there. And his ranking is 87 with an ADP of 85 on ESPN also makes no sense. So it is the duality of fantasy man that you can be Daniel Gafford and you can be Klay Thompson. You can also be PJ Washington and be a sleeper and a bust at the same time. Because PJ also fits into this, where his rank on ESPN for category leagues is 76, which, again, when he finished 140th last season, seems to me to be a little bit of a stretch. If you went through in the 60s and 70s and took Gafford, Clay, and PJ, which those ESPN ranks would suggest, I'll be pretty confident in saying you're going to have a terrible, terrible draft. So I don't really get it. Is this just an overvaluing of Mavericks players because they made the finals? I don't get it. Yahoo, the PJ Washington rank of 106 for points, also doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So again, it is a lot of duality stuff. You can be a sleeper and a bust at literally the same time, just depending on where you play and what your format of league is, and understanding that sometimes the sites will put these information things out and the ADPs will incorporate every single league, but you have to know how that then ties into your individual league and what it means for you. So there you go. Who are some breakout candidates on this team? And I'm not going to lie to you, it's a pretty slim list, and we are, again, going to talk about Dereck Lively II a little bit later on, because he's going under the lens, and he's really the only guy I can see having an actual breakout on this squad. Because there's a lot of guys that we sort of just know what they do and not really in positions to change the narrative or flip the switch, flip the script, or flip the switch. Which one? Either way, choose your own adventure with that word and see who is going to do more. To me, it's Lively and it's not really anybody else. And again, I like him in that 100 to 120 zone if you want. Points leagues, push it back a little bit. And again, we'll put him under the lens in a sec and we'll go through some more of his value there. In terms of risks and the rotation, well, I guess one of the risks is that you've got Jason Kidd, who, despite improving as a coach, still makes some insane decisions at times. But overall, I don't think there's a lot of risk here. The big one, of course, is the centers. It's what do they do? How much do they go to Muxie Kleber and PJ Washington at center as well? Because that could impact stuff. Is it Gafford? Is it Lively? Is it 30 minutes to 18? Is it 22 to 22 with small ball in there as well? I don't know. That's a risk. The other one is Najee Marshall. What if Najee Marshall's defense and him replicating the Derrick Jones Jr. role, what if that happens and Clay's a 27-minute-a-night bench player? Seems unlikely. Seems unlikely Clay would be a 27-minute-a-night bench player, but I also know. Do I know? I'm not trying to think whether how much I know about this or how much I'm speculating. It's probably a mix, right? That when Clay came to Dallas and signed, they said, you'll get every chance that you will start, but don't think you're guaranteed your finishing numbers or finishing minutes or closing minutes. That's probably what I'm more likely to say. Guaranteed. I don't think that was part of the agreement. I don't know why I put Klay Thompson's profile up. That is not what I meant to do. My bad, as I was thinking about something else at the same time. What I meant to put up was actually Najee Marshall, because that's the guy that could come in and take minutes away from Klay. Very different player. A defensive wing who's 6'6", played 19 minutes with 16 usage last season, had 7 and 3.5, 0.7 steals, shot 46 and 79. We wouldn't draft Najee for fantasy at all. 16 teamers, sure, maybe. But he could come in and have an impact on Klay, and maybe he plays 24, maybe Klay plays 27. I think that does push Klay out of your 12-team league discussions, relatively clearly, I think. So I think they're probably the major risks in terms of the rotation and the way that Kidd can sort of switch things up. We are going to come back and put Dereck Lively under the lens. Today's episode, though, is also brought to you by the Game Time app. Game Time, new features. Name a better duo. You can't, because they're always coming up with something new. And the new thing they got is Game Time Picks that makes getting the tickets for your favorite live events easier. It filters out the fluff to find the incredible deals. Well, they don't have to find the incredible deals, actually. Let me rephrase. They've already got the incredible deals there. They'll just show it to you. They'll cut out the nonsense and show, here's the good stuff. Here's what you want. You add that into everything else they got. Views from your seat. We love that. You've got the playoffs coming up for baseball as well. You can get tickets in that area too. You've got the zone deals where you go, I want tickets in this area, and they find you the best price and save on average up to 10%. You've got the all-in pricing button you can toggle on in the app where you can go there and it removes the things like adding processing fees and credit card fees and whatever fees that you might think of. Instead of just that getting chucked on at checkout, you actually see the total inclusive price there as well, which is another great feature that Game Time has. They're always bringing out a good feature, these guys. They know what they're doing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So now it is Dereck Lively going under the lens. You notice I haven't talked about Luka Doncic much in this show. We'll talk about him a little bit later on, but I'm not really sure how much there is to go into with Luka Doncic, to be honest, because he's Luka Doncic. But Dereck Lively is a second-year player who was drafted last season, and when me and Nick Angstaff from Locked On Mavs did the season preview show back in like August 2023, we said it seems very unlikely the team that wants to be really good in the playoffs will start a rookie center. That just doesn't happen. And then the first preseason game, they started Lively and Omax Prosper, and we went, oh, all right. Now, obviously, one of those was a massive red herring, and it wasn't Lively. Prosper played about 4 minutes combined for the rest of the season, whereas Lively was a starter most of the year until he suffered some injuries late, and then Gafford took over. But undoubtedly, he was one of the best rookies in the NBA, one of the most impactful rookies in the NBA, playing a key role on a team that made the NBA Finals, which is just incredibly, incredibly hard to do as a rookie. Incredibly hard. It is easier for a big man, despite the narratives that you will find that people say that big men take longer to get ready for the NBA. That is, I believe, completely flipped falsely. It is wrong. The big men actually can succeed earlier, and it's guards and wings that take longer. But regardless of that, Lively was great. Now, that true shooting number is obviously through the roof, but he is not a shooter. That's the difference between true shooting percentage, which you can see on that graph, and shooting quality, which he's bad at because he's not a shooter. Doesn't hit free throws, doesn't hit threes, doesn't get outside the paint. But he finishes at an incredible rate, and he knows his role. He had absolutely no offensive involvement whatsoever. Realistically, that creation and load and all that stuff is down the bottom. His passer rating really low. He can't pass, but what he does do is he brings it on defense. So he protects the rim pretty well, but he doesn't get up to block as many shots as we would hope. So like the block percentage is good, but in terms of contesting at the rim, not as high as I wanted. There's more room for that to be improved, and I think that is one of the things that we look to for Lively this season as a second-year guy learning more about the NBA. And yeah, maybe he can do more offensively, and I do think he's got a little bit more in his offensive game. But just contesting more shots, that'll be something that comes into it and will really help, I think, overall his fantasy game and getting more minutes. And we'll talk about that more in a second. Now, defensively, we know what he does. He's a rim runner offensively, and defensively, he protects the rim. That's what he is. And his switching is whatever. Like, it's not awesome, but it's fine. He can do that, and he can hang it. But this is a guy that is really young, and there are plenty of things to improve both offensively and defensively. And that's why, again, I'm putting some value in him. You're doing some more this season. Because, look, it's just the profile of that sort of a player, having success at that level that early is not something you always see. Let's take a look, actually, at the numbers that Lively put up last season. Big Dereck, he's 7'1". He had 13 usage in 24 minutes a night. Like, that 24 could easily be 25, but even if it stays at 24, there are ways for his numbers to be better. He had 9 points and 7 rebounds with 1.4 blocks. So the 1.4 blocks could be 1.6. The 8.8 points could become 10.2. I think there is a shot that at some point he develops maybe some part of a three-pointer, but I'm not really relying upon that. And the 51% from the line is obviously horrible. Now, I think if we had to make a bet on what would happen with percentages, is that field goal percentage would go down, but free throw percentage would go up. And I think there's a chance that the scoring rises and the 13 usage becomes 15 usage, but it's not going to be particularly high. When we get back to have a look at some of the more of the things about Lively, what I want to look at on the right-hand side there is the Darko DPM progression. And by the end of the season, Darko is predicting him to be like a zero, like a neutral player. So not a negative, which is really good because league average is not zero. League average is like a negative number. So he's pushed into a high level there with consistent improvement as a rookie. And then the basketball index headshot plot, two things. And this is what I really want to talk about. Because realistically, when we talk about Lively, look, the offensive game might come, but with PJ, with Clay, with Kyrie and Luka, the chance of him getting many shots is pretty low. Right? Well, I think that's obvious. It's all about just getting 1 to 2 extra opportunities with 1 to 2 extra minutes. What this is on the y-axis, it's the block rate on contests. So when you actually contest a shot, how often are you turning that contest into a block? And on the x-axis, it's just how many shots are you contesting. What is very intriguing to me is in the top right corner, in the 97th percentile for block rate on contests, and in the 92nd percentile for how many shots that you contest is Daniel Gafford. So he just goes up and contests every shot, and he's unbelievably good at turning those contests into blocks. In the middle of this group, so down the bottom left, is Jalen Duren, who we know is a bad shot blocker. So not only does he not contest many shots, but when he gets up to contest them, they don't turn into blocks. He's bad at it. In the middle of this is Lively and Onyeka Okongwu. So Dereck Lively is turning about 90% of his contests into blocks. Okongwu is a little bit under that. Again, Gafford's at about 97. But Lively only contesting 70% of the shots at the rim. Okongwu at about 75. Gafford at about 92. So that is a wild difference. So there is a 22 percentile difference between, I said those percentage of shots. It's more percentile is what I meant to say, my bad. Lively and Gafford, 70th percentile versus 92nd percentile. So what if Lively just contests more shots the way that Gafford does? Because he's not bad at converting them into blocks. So if we just see him jump ahead of Okongwu, move into the 80th percentile, 90th percentile in terms of contests. Did you say contests or contests? I feel like contests is the verb and contests is the noun, but I don't even know anymore. Said the word too many times. So realistically, what we're looking at is Lively, just get up there and get your hand in the way of more shots because you convert them pretty well. And that's where the improvement comes as a shot blocker, as a second-year player, where that scope is definitely clear. It is also important to pay attention to how good Gafford is in that area, meaning, again, just having a skepticism on Lively because of Gafford doing those things so well last season. You'll be definitely not shocked to know that in terms of fantasy similarity, the most similar player to Dereck Lively is Daniel Gafford, and they're just the same guy. It's the same sort of stuff, rim running, shot blocking, rebounding, bad free throws. It's the same thing. So it's realistically with those guys who gets more minutes. Some of the other names in there, you got Trace Jackson-Davis, you got Onyeka Okongwu, we've got Mark Williams in that mix as well, who's now injured, which is annoying. But that's the same. That's the player. It's bad free throws, high field goals, good blocks, good rebounds, low usage. We know who this player is. Out of all of those guys, I would say that Okongwu and Lively have the scope to do a little bit more offensively. They're the guys who maybe can do a little bit more. And Lively, of course, is the youngest one of that group. And the best rated prospect, I would say, as well. Let's take a look at the roster for Dallas and where there might be some injury concerns that we have to take a look at. And I've maybe been a little bit harsh here, but I think it's important just to note a couple of these names. Luka has had numerous lower body injuries. Heading into the beginning of last season, he was limping like nobody's business. At the FIBA World Cup, he looked beat up, and I was very worried about his health. He got through most of the season, but if you watched him in the NBA Finals, and I know you did, you cannot tell me that was a picture of health. He was worn down. He was definitely carrying injuries. He was not looking good. And that has been a consistent lower body, groin, hamstring, ankle problem for Luka for a long time. Given the extended run that they had, given the history of just soft tissue problems that has now been 2 extended off seasons, one through the NBA Finals, one through the World Cup. Thankfully, not for Slovenia, but thankfully for Mavericks fans and for Luka fans that they didn't make it through to the Olympics because that would have been extra on his body. So I have to worry about, do they try and preserve? Do they cut the 37 minutes down that Luka will play? Because that's another thing. Like 37 minutes, if you know how numbers work, that's a lot of numbers. It's also a lot of minutes because I don't know how words work. That's a lot. So if we look at what Luka did last season, as I try and bring the numbers up on the screen and they don't come up for whatever reason, but we'll bring them up now. There we go. His production was ridiculous. He played 37 minutes with 36 usage and averaged 34 points and over 4 threes, second in the NBA. 9 rebounds. Somehow got to 10 assists even with Kyrie around. 1.4 steals. And part of the problem with Luka in the past was, you got to punt free throws. Well, he shot 79 from the line. I'm not going to tell you that problem is 100% solved and he's going to be a 79 guy, but he could. It would never made really any sense that he would be so bad as a free throw guy. So he's awesome, very clearly. Those numbers are unbelievably good. There is a concern, again, a small concern, of do they keep the 37 minutes? Does it go back to 35? Do they just try and ease something with him, with Clay there? Drop maybe a usage point, a minute down? What if the free throws go to 75? And what if the injuries and that sort of stuff catches up? And then there's the 2-game playoff week. So I'm just going to use this to talk about Luka a little bit. You can feel very confident in saying Luka, who according to the way that I like to rank guys, was second in -1 rankings last season. He was first, I believe, in in points league rankings. You can say that. I agree, and I think that Luka is awesome. He puts up unbelievably good numbers. There are risk factors, and there are risk factors with everybody. If you want to take Shea ahead of him, there's risk factors for him. Steal variance. The percentages dropped. The free throws came well down at the end of the year. That's possible. Davis, well, a history of injuries, which I don't really think is a problem, but it could be. But what if Davis plays few minutes under JJ Redick? Giannis, knees, calf problems. You got to punt. If you don't want to do that, there's a problem there. There's concerns. My thing with Luka in the 2-game playoff week is as follows. Is that I looked at it because he had the same thing, exact same week, exact same thing last season. Is that Luka Doncic in that week was the 50th best player for category leagues and I think 30th best player for points leagues. Even only playing 2 games, that is true. And it's very easy to make an argument that Shea, who's only got, I think, 3 games in that week, and Giannis, who I think's got 4, but like they could get hurt. That is true. And you go, well, then you're in the same spot as Shea is hurt. But you can easily throw the argument, what if Luka gets hurt and then he plays 1 game? And then you're in real trouble. And again, I think that Luka is better than Shea and better than Giannis for fantasy this season. And I think that he will outproduce them over the course of the year. But I also think that if you didn't take Luka at 3, because you were worried about that 2-game week, it's not going to make you at a significant disadvantage in making it to the playoffs. I don't think that the gap between Luka and those other guys is so stark that you are. If you said I'm taking Luka here or I'm taking Darius Garland, I'd say, look, the 2-game playoff week's not that important in that scenario, right? But you're still getting Shea, or you're taking Davis, or if he was healthy, you'd take Embiid, but he's not. But that's a different point. Or you take AD. It's a small downgrade. But having a guy there of that caliber, I actually don't think makes it unlikely you make it to the playoffs because that guy's on your team. But that 2-game week, which cannot be more than 2, it can only go to 2 or 1 or 0, is really troubling for me. If I was playing Yahoo default and the 2-game week was my first week of playoffs, I would probably do it. I'd feel good about beating. Hopefully I'm good enough in the regular season and I beat a bad team, or I have a bye and I'm good. If it's like my league, where it's the final week is 2 games and I'm in the championship, it's good to get to the championship. That's all true. But I'd be really considering not doing it at 3. But you also might think, well, if I get to the finals, we'll see. Who knows what else is going to happen? And that is also true. And if I thought there was a massive, massive gap between Luka and the next couple of guys, then I'd be like, screw the 2-game week. Because there becomes and in a points league, honestly, unless I'm taking Giannis over Luka, that difference there is big enough. I go, who cares? That difference is big enough. But when the gap becomes smaller, that 2-game week looms large. It turns Luka into a 4th-round type of player in your fantasy championships, which is just not. I don't think that's a great thing or something you want to be feeling or relying upon. Now, we got disregarded we got distracted there because we're talking injuries. I'm going to put Kyrie on this list because he's Kyrie. And I'm not going to come here, you never know, he might take off for a birthday or something. There's so much of the stuff about Kyrie, maybe it frustrated you, I get it, but there's so much that got overblown. But injuries are a legitimate problem and have been for a long time with Kyrie. And last season we saw it again. Dereck Lively landed on his foot, smashed his heel into the court, and it happened. And it's an accumulation of lower body injuries that I am not discounting Kyrie for nonsense. I'm not discounting Kyrie for injuries at all. But I just want to bring it to your attention that he has had trouble staying healthy. Daniel Gafford, he's the locker room legend for a reason. He did not miss time. Even in that season where everyone claimed he was hurt all the time, he played 77 out of 82 games. There's always something with him. He sprained his ankle and he comes back really quickly. But that was the thing. And the same with Dereck Lively, who did seem to hurt his ankle multiple times last season too. And largely that's the role they play. A lot of up and down jumping with people underneath him and they land on it. So there's a risk there. And the other one, of course, is Clay. Even though he played a lot last season, we know the history of that knee/Achilles in the same leg, which does lead you to some concern at some. Not that it's going to recur, but there is a concern over his overall injury history. But when we talk about it, these guys are all healthy now. I just wanted to bring up a couple of points that either someone else will bring up or have a question about and address them in that way. What about the schedule, which I have gone through quite a bit there already? But let's just break down everything about it, because they've got a good number of quality games. 53 is a really good number. They've got 13 back-to-backs, which is low, which is great for the guys that might be tired. They've got 14 maximum game weeks, which is in the middle of that zone. So all of that is actually pretty positive. It's the two-gamer that really kills. If you're going March 23rd to finish, they go 4-4-2. If you go March 30th, it's a 4-2-4, which is not as disastrous. Actually, a 4-2-4 is almost, you could also consider that worse than a 4-4-2, because you don't have the easy first round matchup that you can deal with. It's in the middle, and if you lose that one, you don't even make the championship game, where all sorts of luck can go your way or not. So that actually might be worse if it's a March 30th scenario. Yahoo default, we go 2-4-4. Again, there are ways to be able to push for that bye, or even if you don't, like you feel like you got a handle on winning that first round, and that's okay. And then ESPN default is 2-4-4-3. But this is huge. Now, I don't have an issue with Dereck Lively or Daniel Gafford or PJ Washington or Klay Thompson or whoever I'm drafting, anyone else, apart from my first or second round pick, which, based on their projections and their rankings in the past, it's Luka and Kyrie. And that pushes Kyrie from being an early second round category guy to an end of second, maybe third round player to me. And in points leagues, definitely around there. And Luka, where it would be an absolute no-brainer to take Luka at 3, it at least asks the question of can I do something else at that position? I think that's reasonable. Let's take a look at young guys on this team, and I reckon this will be a relatively short segment unless you want me to just glaze Dereck Lively even further. But if we look at my Bazemore Dynasty metrics, he comes out pretty good, about top 75. There's, I guess, a ceiling overall upside limitation because of where does the usage come, especially where the team sits currently, but I think he's really good. The next guy on this list is Jaden Hardy, who I don't really know where Hardy is going to play this season, but a guy that was a potential top 5 pick who fell to the second round after playing for the G League Ignite, has a top 125 Bazemore number. But we are talking about 2 years in, and I still don't know where Jaden Hardy's role is. Last season, he played 14 minutes a night, but 25 usage. He had 7 points with 1.5 assists on 41 and 78. Nothing super good there. And there's still Luka and Kyrie ahead of him, and then brought in Spencer Dinwiddie. I was hoping that they wouldn't, and we would get the opportunity for Hardy to be an every night rotation guy playing 25 minutes a night. But you could also make an argument that Dinwiddie and Grimes are there now, and Hardy is out of the rotation. So while I do have a top 125 Bazemore grade on him, I just don't know how he's going to be used, and maybe it does require him being traded and moved to another team. He is the Cam Thomas in hiding that we haven't really seen be full Cam Thomas. And if he was in the Cam Thomas role in Brooklyn, he would be putting up... He's not as accomplished as a shot maker as Cam Thomas, who's always had that reputation of an unbelievable shot maker. But Hardy's probably a better passer, probably a better three-point shooter overall. Debatable, but maybe. The other guy on this list is Olivier Maxence Prosper, first-round pick last season, who honestly, when he came into the NBA, had a great reputation because of size. For all the size queens out there, they loved how big and long Prosper was. But the numbers coming out of Marquette were not great. They didn't translate fantasy-wise. We didn't look at him and go, well, he's got an unbelievable stat profile for fantasy. This looks awesome. It was like, hey, this guy could actually turn into a really good lockdown perimeter defender. We'll see where the offensive game goes. But the fantasy side of that's not quite there yet. But he did nothing. He started that first preseason game, and then we just never saw him again. He played 8 minutes a night with 16 usage. He averaged 3 points, 2 rebounds, shot 39 from the field, and again this season Najee Marshall's brought in. PJ Washington's there, Clay's there. I don't think Prosper is playing. And he already was paired with being an older rookie, with having a poor fantasy profile and being a low usage player. So the numbers have him as outside the top 300 in terms of Bazemore numbers for a rebuilding team. Don't love him really at all in any sort of respect like that. Let's go now to take a look at who the number one risk versus reward player was on this squad. And it was PJ Washington, largely because of field goal percentage and free throw percentage, which can vary a lot for him and for other players. He generates some defensive stats and gets by on some threes. He's a weird player. 87 category league ranking spot variance and 5 fantasy points. So he's probably more stable in points than he is in categories, but we know the PJ Washington experience, I would hope, at this point. Lastly, we look at some guys who are over the hill. And this team has a lot of guys post age 29, which is the cutoff that I use here. So we've already talked about Kyrie. We've talked about Klay Thompson. Both of these guys are old. Spencer Dinwiddie joins the fray for a reason. Obviously, he was in Dallas before, and he had some really good moments as a guard, but that was before Kyrie was here, so I don't think we need to be caring too much about Spencer, who honestly looked pretty washed last season. Remember that? He played for the Lakers. Remember when he got traded from the Nets to the Raptors said, absolutely not. We are not even buying you out. We are just cutting you. He averaged 10 points with 5 assists, steals, horrid, blocks, horrid, field goals, horrid, low volume threes in 28 minutes a night. He had a little run of being a pretty good player who was better in points than categories, but the fall-off has hit. He's not even a small guard, but it has hit, and I don't think we need to care much at all. Dante Exum came in last season after a couple of years away in Europe, but he is over the age of 29 now. He was a huge surprise for many reasons and had some of the most unbelievable hot streak shooting stuff you will ever see. And I can guarantee you it will not happen this season. We already saw it fall away completely in the playoffs, but it's not a thing. He played 20 minutes a night with 15 usage, and he shot 53 from the field, and I think it was like 49% from 3. He hit his free throws, which I do believe is real, but the 3 assists are fine, but also like Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson, Quentin Grimes, Spencer Dinwiddie. Does Exum even play? Maybe it's down to him and Jaden Hardy as who gets the last rotation position here. And then the other guys on that list in terms of the older over-the-hill guys are 2 of the big men who in the past have had sizable roles. One of them, Maxi Kleber, had the old Tom Thibodeau usage going. Kleber is 33 now, played 20 minutes with 9 usage, and his role used to be as a shot-blocking big, which he did, like 0.7 blocks in 20 minutes is okay, who hits threes, but that part of his game is gone. He cannot move as well as he used to. The injury, I think, has really created some problems, a lot of ongoing knee stuff for him. And I think that, again, with Gafford and Lively there, he's probably just going to be a backup power forward. And eventually they would hope that someone like Prosper is able to step into that role. And after years and years of Mavericks fans having to suffer through the Dwight Powell experience, that is also over. Powell is a legend locker room guy, a Canadian legend as well, which already detracts 10 or 12 points from him. 13 minutes a night, 9 usage also on the Thibodeau plan. 3 points and 3.5 rebounds, 68 and 71. We know that Jason Kidd will trust him if things ever go awry and someone's hurt. He'll know he can get 18 minutes of nonsense out of Dwight Powell, and his ability to be in the right spot offensively and defensively next to Luka was part of the reason why Kidd would trust him. But he doesn't have to trust him anymore, so therefore he won't trust him anymore, and we don't have to worry about him playing really at all this season. So I think we're okay there. And that's, I think, basically... Oh, and actually, you know what? We haven't talked about this guy because he didn't fall into the under-23 category. He's probably not going to be drafted in most spots. It's Quentin Grimes, who I thought was awesome for the Knicks 2 years ago. Last season, struggled early with knee problems, lost his starting spot, went to Detroit, didn't want to be there, who can blame him, wanted to get back to Texas, and now he is here. Now, there is no opportunity for him to start. There's Klay, there's Kyrie, there's Luka. He is not going to start. But Grimes is 24 years of age. He played 20 minutes a night last season, 7 points and 2 rebounds. His shooting was off. But I actually believe that Grimes, in the right spot, and this is not it, but in the right spot, if he's able to sort of boost up what he does, maybe find his way to a new team, he can be one of those... You want to hear the guy who's the KCP heir apparent? I think, best case, it is him. Now, that's not a high-end fantasy player at all. And I do worry that the knee is rooted. The difference between him and KCP is that Grimes can pass. So it was a terrible season. The momentum from the year before was lost. But I'm not fully giving up. And I want to see if he gets used, how the health is. Does he play over Exum and Dinwiddie and Hardy? Where does he fit? But he is on this team. Just one of those ones that in a dynasty league, if he was dropped and it's deep, I would grab just in case. Because he's only 24. He's only 24. So there is some room for improvement still to come. And we just hope that he gets healthy. And that's the Dallas Mavericks. So if we want to do a bit of a rundown on their value, again, Luka, we went completely into that. Like if you actually, with a normal playoff schedule, if you said, I'll take him at 2, that's fine, do it. That's how good he is. But there is lower body, built-up injury stuff, playoff schedule, free throw reversion, are all possibilities. Not saying they're going to all happen. Well, the playoff schedule is going to happen. That is guaranteed. That won't change. but he's fine there. Kyrie, we look at maybe now towards early third round instead of middle of second round. Gafford is a later round guy, so is Lively, watching those minute splits. And Clay is like a round 10, round 11 player who's better in categories probably than in points, but it's close. And PJ, if you're looking for forwards, he's fine as well. Probably better in points than categories too, but don't get sucked into the take all these guys in the 70 zone that ESPN suggests. The defensive guys like Marshall and Grimes could have impacts, but it's not going to be really anything that matters for us fantasy-wise. I'm sorry I'm not going to get into a breakdown of Markieff Morris or Kessler Edwards or Brandon Williams or AJ Lawson. Their second-round pick, which is the only guy they picked in the draft this season, Melvin Ajinça, has not signed a contract. I don't believe that he's coming over this season, so he'll be stashed over in Europe, so we're not going to get into him here either. But what we are going to get into is you giving me a thumbs up, hopefully a subscribe, a follow, and a comment down below, and I am going to wrap it up. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.